I'll be honest, before this pandemic hit, I was down to like, a few meetings a month. And that was, what I felt was fine. And it was good routine because I had my right. I mean, I was texting with friends every day, but I just wasn't going to a ton of meetings. And with this virtual pivot in the meetings and then just this pandemic and the stress of it and what's happened in our medical workforce and everything, like I'm at like 5 or 6 meetings a week now again.
Mhm.
And and it's just, it's been the greatest blessing like of this last year.
Where you are now may not be where you came from. The choices you make today may spiral out of control or spin you in the right direction. Discover a riveting, true story of how Carlos Vieira nearly destroyed his life and lived to tell about it. Stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness. Knocking doors down along the way. And don't miss others telling their powerful stories on our podcast. Visit kddmediacompany.com.
Welcoming to Knocking Doors Down, Dr. Adam Hill. Thank you very much for your time, good sir.
Yeah, thank you both. Pleasure to be with you today.
I love talking to doctors because mine's impossible to get a hold of. So I need to talk to you. I'm just kidding.
I'll pass on a message for you.
I see you drinking out of an Indiana Pacers mug, boy.
We're gonna have to cut this interview short.
No, as a basketball fan, man, and I loved Reggie Miller. It was always so heartbreaking for me. It's like, can't this team just get one championship?
That's right. Yeah, I grew up with Reggie Miller for sure, and everybody here in Indiana has a basketball hoop in their backyard. So I'm a pretty hardcore Butler basketball fan. That's my alma mater, and they went out pretty unceremoniously last night in the Big East tournament. But definitely a big basketball fan here.
It's okay. I'm a Warrior fan, so we're used to being humbled, especially these past couple of years.
Yeah, I was born in '78 as a Warriors / Lakers fan, so I definitely had some bad years of basketball as well. Well, we want to definitely talk about your book, which of course is available. People can get it on Amazon. The link is in the podcast description. Long Walk Out of the Woods. What made you, as a doctor, working in the medical profession, finally decided it was the right time to write a book, put this out, and shed some light on an area until, I really looked into speaking with you, had no idea the amount of substance abuse that can go on in the medical profession, as well as the suicide rate and depression, which often leads to those thoughts of suicide.
Yeah, the impetus for me really was a handful of years into recovery. Lost a friend and a colleague to suicide, and at that time, I was working my own program. I was in recovery, but I just felt this piece of me that was disingenuous, not living an authentic life, that I had so much more that hopefully I could give to reach out to people who were struggling, especially in not just the colleagues I work with, but the patients and families that I'm privileged to see every single day, that maybe there's a greater ability to connect in our own stories and that. And it was through that, honestly, that it started to, for me, like shake off this cloak of shame and this next chapter of my own recovery journey, where I really just started to live openly and honestly. And then shortly after that, it started to pour out of me. I wrote the book as, I initially tell people, as therapy. To be honest, I wanted to get it out of my head, get it out into paper, and eventually it crafted into what it became. But and now I hope it reaches people that need to hear a message of hope. So it all kind of came out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what for you though was some of those experiences? Because just hearing your story, even from your residency and some of the challenges there, people don't realize. I think there was you made reference to a car accident when you're getting an average of about 3 hours of sleep a night as well. can you kind of maybe shed a little bit of light on that, or what that is like for people that are becoming doctors and don't understand the amount of dedication that is put into it, and why that can often probably lead to, the depression, suicidal thoughts, some of those that can end up committing suicide as well.
Yeah, I think that there is a fair amount of just built-in structural barriers to just be able to take care of yourself that exist in high pressure, stressful work environments. And it's not unique only to medicine, but in my lens and what I have lived experience in is that you're always tasked, ingrained, taught to put the needs of other people above your own, and really to those severe of degrees, sometimes having a handful of hours of sleep for a week and coming into the hospital every single night, or working 30-hour shifts or 36 hours at a time. And it's this cultural expectation of what we teach each other in medicine, of what you need to do to succeed, to be great in your profession. And it has, obviously significant detrimental health effects, both physically and mentally on the workforce. And that is a piece of this evolving epidemic of suicide and substance use disorder that happens, as well as mental health conditions that remain untreated in our workforce, is that, we just don't permit the time and space to take care of ourselves first, let alone our loved ones, our family, our children. And that's a big focus of mine, is getting that balance right.
Yeah. Well, and you speak so highly, of course, of your lovely wife that was there with you through it all. Um, what, how much of an impact did she have, not only on, of course, leading to your sobriety, putting in the work, and you have two daughters, correct?
2 daughters and a son.
Oh,
Yeah.
and a son now. Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, when I wrote the book, I had 2 children. So we have a third now.
That's
You
awesome.
got to rewrite it. Or just
I
add in
know.
a chapter.
When the baby grows up, she's gonna be like, I wasn't included in this work. What's going on?
What is going on, Dad?
That's a heck of a load, because I have a son and a daughter, so I know of each, but man, sometimes the boy is, much different than the girl, and the rambunctiousness and something else. That's a hell of a dynamic.
I'll tell you what, the 4-year-old girl is gonna be the the test of my lifetime.
Well, let's jump back to Adam as a little boy. What was growing up like? What were you like as a kid, and how did you eventually take an interest in the medical field?
Sure. I had a really normal childhood, to be honest. Really loving parents. I grew up in a small town, rural farm community in Indiana. Hardworking parents. My dad was a mental health therapist and counselor, worked with teenagers, young adults with their own mental health conditions and addiction stories. And I saw, that from the outside, growing up, even inside my own home, of the compassionate, empathic care that he gave to others, how he poured out to other people as what he, saw as an ability to serve. And so I saw that, and I, really wanted to be able to do something in my life that had that kind of impact of giving back, or to helping other people in their moments of need. And that definitely crafted, my professional arc, and what eventually became going into medicine. I did have, I was a pretty shy, introverted kid. I had a lot of social anxiety and some awkwardness, and difficulty assimilating into school. I was that kid who hid behind the coat rack every morning, and the teacher had to coax out and drag out into the classroom. And who always wanted to run down the hall and visit my sister, who was 2 classrooms, grades above me. And out of that it did come a fair amount of bullying and even physical trauma, and getting beat up and thrown in trash cans, and just years of that I think I didn't really unpack until my 30s, when I got into recovery, that it did influence how I saw the world, how I interacted with groups of people, and that social element, that I had a lot of social angst. And And that built and built as I got older into my teenage years and even into my early 20s, and eventually became part of my alcohol story.
Yeah. Well, what was it like, going in through high school? Did you find yourself that maybe eventually going to the parties and stuff like that, that you were able to connect? Did that roll over maybe until your college years, or?
Yeah, I on the outside, I think most people who knew me in high school thought, I mean, I was a perfectionist, so I was a high achiever, both in athletics and academics. I was on an all-state tennis player and ran track, and high achiever in grades. And I think a lot of people saw me probably as somebody who had it all figured out.
All right.
And in the inside, I was still quite fragile and broken at times. And the connected dots to drinking started when I was about 14, and I could go out to a party, have a handful of drinks, and just that social lubricant, that numbing away of anxiety, that fitting in. And that I really started to feel that relationship with alcohol even then. And then it evolved, to late high school I mean, I remember being able to drink a case of beer when I was 18 years old, and that's not normal, you know,
Yeah.
like, but over the course of an entire day, being able to do that when friends would have five or six, and it just didn't affect me the same way. And I didn't connect the dots. I didn't have ramifications. I was a binge drinker, occasional drinker for most of my teens and 20s. Um, but I knew and I felt that, like, this is not normal, and I don't process or handle this the way that other people do.
Yeah, no, that definitely smacks me right in the face. Going out, I can go out with guys, 150, 200 pounds more than me. And, here I am drinking them under the table. And I'm like, wow, what's wrong with you guys? And that not really changing, I think people don't realize that about us that are addicts, alcoholics. Our brain and body just do not process it the way that a normal person does.
Yeah, and people would always tell me, I didn't even know that you were drinking, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that almost gave me this false sense of security and almost pride in that I could hide this away, right? That bolstered up the ability to live in secrecy for a long time, is that people would say that to me, and I didn't seem affected the way that I possibly was. So
Yeah. What was then? Let's talk a little bit about the college years. You ended up at Duke University, if I remember correctly, right?
I was at Duke University for one of my medical training. So I was at Butler University for my undergraduate college, which is here in Indianapolis. And 2010, 2011 Final Four national championship basketball team, Butler University.
Yes, sir. So let's talk about it, because at this time you're probably starting to enter your residency period, correct?
Yeah, so I get through college, and even so, you do 4 years of college and then 4 years of medical school. It was really, I had this ongoing sort of just binge, unhealthy relationship with alcohol, but still, it wasn't a part of my daily, weekly, or honestly even monthly life at that time.
Mm.
It was really in medical school where I started to have major depressive disorder symptoms, and where I lost all interest in in family and friends and doing things. I just had difficulty sleeping at times, or other times would stay in bed for a few days at a time, and trying to, or experiencing those symptoms and trying to get through medical training that requires like 16 hours a day of studying was a difficult grind. And so a lot of anxiety and depressive symptoms throughout that medical school time. And it was the first time that I had actually sought treatment, and started on an antidepressant, started seeing a counselor, and it worked and it helped at that time. It wasn't then sort of until, as you alluded to, when I started the more formal clinical medical training like in residency, and then the next step after that, which is a fellowship where you subspecialize in medicine, that alcohol started to become more and more part of the story.
Were you drinking on antidepressants as well?
So I was, back then I was on Wellbutrin as the antidepressant I was on. But once again, even through medical school, I was, I would study so hard, and we would have like 6 week chunks of time between tests, like that you would just study, 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 take all your exams, and then maybe have a day or two break. And it'd be on those day or two breaks, then, I would binge and possibly
Sure.
black out or make bad decisions. And then go back to that cycle again of studying really hard, not drinking. So at that point it was still kind of that level, and it wasn't to the daily drinking, which it eventually became, when I was doing my clinical medicine, like in fellowship at Duke, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. What for you, was that a point of where you had the 6 weeks and then the time off, and then was that kind of a period of justification, like, shit, I earned it, I've worked hard, this is my way to vent and get it out and relax? And
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, there's a part of the culture that, in college, binge drinking culture is obviously ingrained in so many colleges and universities. The same is actually true in medical school, is that, you'll have these round of tests or study for big board exams or things. And then people do like all go out and let loose, and, um, and so there is a piece of that culture too, is like, you just put life and everything on pause for a certain amount of time, including friends and family and socialization, and you just grind. So I think that part of that is just ingrained in what's expected.
yeah, well, you of course you're a pediatric oncologist, and God, I can't imagine. I know that you've talked about a story of a young lady who needed a bone marrow transplant, Zoe. Do you think those kind of things that really had a taxing impact upon you? Because a lot of people, of course, if anyone's watching that's maybe trying to understand addiction, a lot of us can be really empathic, and we almost used our substance to numb us or to overly fill in a different direction or whatever it is. Did things like Zoe's story, who unfortunately passed away, have a lot of that impact and maybe that depression too?
Yeah, I think you nailed it in terms of your description for me. I mean, I'm a natural empath and care deeply, and I used alcohol as a numbing mechanism from intense emotions, whether they were sadness, sorrow, grief, anger, resentment. And so it was the at the time, the cumulative effect of seeing tragedy, death, trauma, you know being the one to perform chest compressions on a baby and then have to tell their family that they didn't survive, and doing that day after day, week after week. I think that cumulative trauma and not having the space to talk about it, to process it, to unload and to work through that, adds up. And it does for so many people that work in this line of work. And once again, not unique to medicine. I mean, these threads are the same for paramedics and firefighters and police officers and the military, and that you gotta have spaces to talk about what is salient and unnatural, and just can be really um, just impactful moments of your life. And so it wasn't until years later that I had the tools, the techniques, the community, the self-awareness, the insight to start unpacking that, where I really started to feel the meaning and the purpose of showing up and being there, and that it was a beautiful moment of life and humanity that I was able to share this moment in time with this beautiful young girl who changed my life, and hopefully I had an impact in hers. And so 10 years into recovery, I can see that, but at the time, you're right, those things weighed me down pretty significantly.
Yeah, I want to bring that up because I, in reading more about you and your circumstances, it always harkens me back to people talking about a doctor's bedside manner that maybe folks don't understand. Well, that doctor didn't have the best bedside manner, and people maybe not understanding that sometimes if a doctor's cut and dry, the best they can is that they're trying to hold it together emotionally and do the best with their job and with their training and knowledge that they can in a situation.
Yeah, I think that can be true for some people. I mean, in any line of work, there are, people that just aren't great communicators, or maybe just even not nice people. But I think
Yeah.
I think that that's true as well. But you're right. There is a survival technique that sometimes is even taught in medicine, not to get connected to your patients, not to care too deeply, to draw really concrete boundaries, and so that you don't get sucked in and you can't fill back up your own cup to be able to walk home and take care of your family. And so and I do see a lot of people that are hardened that way, or some that intentionally do that as this shield of protection against their own boundaries. For me, that always felt disingenuous, that I came into this as wanting to practice compassion and humanity and connection to other people, and that, hopefully I can use my gifts as a communicator and an empath to make a difference. And so, when I was in active addiction, I felt that I was pulling back, and maybe that I wasn't as effective in my whole sense and being there because I was so sick. Um, but I was doing that out of self-preservation and maybe preservation for my addiction too.
Sure.
Uh, but I've learned over time, how to be able to do that and give myself wholly to the people I'm caring for, and then bring it back to a centered space where I can live my life and raise my kids and kiss my wife and hug my parents. They're vaccinated now, so I can, and do that in a balanced way.
Yeah. Now, was it when the drinking really got out of hand, was it evident with your loved ones, especially your wife?
Yeah, so we lived across the country because my family and her family is all from the Midwest. So living out in North Carolina, we were quite isolated. And so, there weren't a lot of, my friends or her friends or our family were around to notice, and they knew how busy I was, and it became a convenient excuse not to keep in touch with people when you're in that intense level of medical training. So in that, the isolationism was self-fulfilling, right? um, but my wife distinctly knew and felt it and lived through it, and tried to coax me into soft accountability in the initial stages, and eventually very loving, stern ultimatums of accountability, which I needed to be able to get the help that I really needed.
Yeah. Well, what were you starting to see, in, not only within your residency, by the time that you're practicing, but you started to see your fellow doctors and medical field people really struggling with depression and even losing someone to suicide, as I recollect.
Yeah, when I was in the midst of it myself, obviously I was in the midst of a very selfish disease and space. And so, it took years of crawling out of that hole to even wipe away the fog from my own eyes, to be able to see clearly that this was larger than something that I had lived through and struggled, that this is really something actually fairly common in the medical community, but yet completely unspoken of. And it's this silent curriculum of just hidden agendas, and often just stigmatized and pushed away into closets of secrecy, that really, I felt like, maybe this is my opportunity to shine a light on this so that other people will feel comfortable in getting help. And the truth is, I've actually lost 5 colleagues
Oh my
to
gosh.
suicide in my career. and I actually, just yesterday, a friend of mine's colleague died by suicide, and just sent me an email last night from their program director, and they were mourning and grieving. And so this just happened in the last few days, and no one I knew personally, but a friend of a friend,
Yeah.
and these stories unfortunately happen every day. And there are a few that I think of on the national stage brought some attention. Lorna Breen, who died by suicide after working in New York City in COVID units, and died last year. And her family's done a fair amount of legislation work and just trying to advocate on a national stage for attention to this. I hope my work contributes to that too, so that people don't feel ashamed. And even more importantly, we break down some of the systematic barriers that are in place to get people into treatment, which exist in the medical field pretty abundantly.
5150 is power. The power to overcome, the power to persevere, the power to set your life on a course for success. When you're faced with the challenges life throws at you, you focus and do what is needed to go beyond what is required. So stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness, knocking doors down along the way. We are 5150.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Is it because obviously anyone that's a doctor, my gosh, you put an incredible amount of work and this isn't to putting one down, but the people maybe don't understand the amount of time, dedication, not just to the process to become anyone that's working in the medical field, but how you talk about the isolation, time away from family. And they get to that point and they're practicing and all the stuff they put their lives into this point. That do you find, and especially with your own experience, that sometimes this is something that people don't want to report to the medical board because they're afraid that their practice is put on hold, everything they put into it, that they're, that maybe they won't get a chance to re-enter the medical profession, or like, you said, stigmatized with that forever?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And there are, a fair amount of studies out there that show the data on this, that, a majority of individuals don't report what they're going through, whether it's mental health diagnoses or substance use disorder, or even being in recovery, because of fear of repercussions or ramifications, that they'll have to report those things. Because we have this really archaic system in medicine that, although we treat these as medical conditions and realize the pathophysiology, the pharmacology, the addiction, condition as a medical condition, we still stigmatize and treat our own within our own walls of saying that this is a weakness, a moral failing, a red flag, something that should be, treated differently. And so very much put these roadblocks to the extent of, having to disclose what medications you're on a job application, or every year that you recertify to keep your medical license, having to put the medications you're on. Have you been in mental health counseling or treatment? That we make these like anomalous questions of aberrance that like you have to report, when the truth is almost anybody who sees death, dying, trauma, tragedy, suffering every single day needs a space to unpack that. And mental health therapy and counseling should be, in my opinion, a prerequisite,
Yeah.
at least concurrent to what we're doing every day. And then we got to quit making it abnormal. And so there's a lot of fear about that. And what happens if then, you report, and I write about a little bit in my book, the story that then, happened and I had to disclose. And I'm not here to put down or say there's not a place for accountability and accountability programs. And I needed that, and it helped. And I had structure and routine, and those things helped keep me sober. But asking those questions for most people is where they stop seeking help, and they either just don't get treatment or self-medicate, or for doctors who have prescription writing ability, sometimes just write it themselves and treat themselves, which is dangerous in its own right.
I could only imagine, with the, of course, not only with the opioid crises, but the crises, but I've definitely had read some research about that, where there was, like you said, medical professionals writing their own prescriptions, and there you go, you're off to the races pretty quick.
Yeah, that's right. And the the data on actual substance use disorder medicine is so underreported, it's hard to know what the true numbers are. But there are a few studies out there that have showed, as high as potentially twice as high as the general population that these things exist. And same with mental health conditions too. I mean, we take a subset of really high achievers who in generally healthy patient population of or of college graduates with low rates of anxiety and depression, lower than the general population, and it increases like tenfold 2 years into medical school, from to like 30% of people that have depression. And so that, in itself is a commentary on the environment that we're putting people in and not the people. And I think we're still stuck in this language of the conversation of, well, it's something that I did wrong, or it's my fault, or it's my, mental weakness, instead of really looking. And I think that this is going to be more and more and more evident in the next few years after the fallout of the mental health crisis of this pandemic, is to say the environments that we've placed people in, and from many different aspects of how we've not cared for people, that'll have long lasting ramifications.
Yeah, been hearing you talk about that, Adam. I think it's so similar to anyone that is performing at a high level, be it a high performing athlete, or an actor, a musical act that goes around the country. You're so isolated away from a quote unquote normal routine, a normal life. Like you said, 36 hours on the job. I can't even fathom if I don't get 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night now, I'm total shit. It's like, forget this day. My anxiety spikes or whatever it is, and people don't understand that those in the medical profession are performing at this high level every single day. There's not an off season.
I can't do shit after 7 hours or before 7 hours of sleep.
Yeah, and then for me, like, I'm in a great place with my work environment, my work life balance that I fought really hard for, but then throw 3 kids into that, right? and like, and an 11-month-old, and so I'm like, oh God, when I get sleep, I can get sleep. But yeah, no, it's completely true, and I think just that. We haven't reshifted the expectations in those high performative careers to acknowledge that, are human beings in the middle of this, and we've digitized it and monetized it and made so many things about the capitalistic business model of output that, like, that to take a step back and realize that, people that delivering this compassionate care are people first, and just trying to do the right thing. And at least that's, what I try to do.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because they see it as a systemic breakdown, and as we continue to have all these fights about medical care and how it is to go, and at the end of the day, not only the patients, but oftentimes patients are forgetting that those whom they're dealing with are humans too, and their own struggles and everything else. And I know I've been guilty in my earlier life, but I love my pediatric doctor, and I remember going into his office. He had Batman and Superman, my favorites, and then I wanted to put him right up there with it, not really understanding, oh, this guy goes home to a family, and we just forget that sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it was alluded to even just in our intro before air, though, too, that the system has so many breaks in it. It's not serving patients the way that it needs to. It's so diluted and convoluted now, and it's such a difficult system to navigate. And talking about sort of just even being able to get a call back from the doctor, or a follow-up, or an appointment, or sort of things like that, our delivery of care model too just isn't working for people. and especially in the people that need it the most. We operate in this sick care system instead of a preventative health mindset in the US that honestly, for all of us delivering care, feels so self-defeating, and we feel hopeless and helpless to actually, you know, make a difference in somebody's life. That my friend who's an ER doctor can, you know, can treat somebody who's in, you know, potential withdrawals and get them into, you know, acute recovery. And then we're going to send somebody out back living with homelessness with no resources and no job and no, you know, infrastructure to get their life back on track. And then the cycle just repeats. And that's just heartbreaking that, you know, that the system feels set up for failure.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because it's in so many different situations in our society and culture, as you pointed out, is that oftentimes people don't do any, there's not any self-care and preventative care until sometimes it's a little bit too late.
Yeah, and we don't invest in those, right, on the national strategy level of community resources and community programming. My dad was a small town mental health therapist for 40 years, and I saw every year, to the point where he eventually quit, and that, you know, his budgets were cut, his resources were cut, his funding was cut, you know, and that happened year after year, decade after decade. And we need to have a serious conversation, not only about, you know, how we criminalize and punish addiction in this country, but how we actually bring people, you know, in the communities that they need them, with representation that will fight against the discrimination that we see and lack of access in so many communities of need, of getting people community-based resources that work. And you know, and that requires such an overhaul that it's difficult to contemplate it happening. But, you know, I hope that, you know, some of that investment happens in my lifetime.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had some guests on here, and these gentlemen that an organization in Fresno called Pain, and they primarily, you know, focus with the youth, but anyone in general with it. And you know, they said that perception that the addict, alcoholic is the person under the bridge, when oftentimes it can be the kid 2 doors down from mom and dad, or the parent 2 doors down from the kids. And
Or
you
the
know, it's
doctor taking care of your kid.
absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, it's an unfortunate thing, but we're definitely grateful that you jump on here and help us highlight that and bring more awareness to it, because that's the only thing we can do in the fight.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, you know, and to highlight voices, to raise voices, to raise awareness. Like, that's how things will continue to change. And, you know, and at least for me personally, which I'm very humbled for this opportunity to be with you, that, you know, hopefully I can add my voice to that fight.
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the lady well, not behind Adam, but next to Adam, and sometimes out there in the forefront. What was you just really spoke so highly of your wife during the times of your addiction and her strength. What, in retrospect, has that meant to you, as well as getting involved in programs? Because you're still heavily active in your recovery.
Yeah, that's right. You know, she not only is the person who, you know, stood by my side with grace and an understanding that I can't even begin to fathom, and patience, but then she also has gone on her own recovery journey over the last decade herself, you know, being involved in Al-Anon. And then, you know, just this past week, you know, getting connected to a wife who's, you know, working through some things with her husband, who's, you know, struggling in active addiction, trying to find recovery, and lending her ear and helping them, you know, talk through that, of being a survivor, being somebody who's gone through it on the other side and lived through it. That, you know, now she has her own voice and her own ability to be an ally. That's really beautiful and powerful, and that I never even saw, you know, coming. That I just cherish and love, that now I see her reaching out and helping other people in that way. You know, so I'm one lucky man. We've been together about almost 14 years now, and we'll be married for 11 coming up this summer. And so, we were only married for a year or two before most of, this active suicidality and really active addiction took hold. And so, sometimes I'm stuck with me through it. And I think that there's something to say that people don't talk about that often, talk about it in recovery rooms sometimes, but that you're just rediscovering yourself, and you don't know at the end of that whether or not you're meant to be with the person because you just didn't know each other sober.
Yeah.
And for us, that was scary.
Yeah.
And we went through, our own marriage counseling and our own process of really working at that and finding out who are we now in our early 30s. Well, I was in my early 30s. She's a few years younger than me, but of that, and what came of it was just an opportunity to have really open communication and dialogue of our needs, our hopes, our wishes, and just like anybody, we have terrible days and great days, and we're holding space for gratitude and all the shit at the same time, right? And
Yeah.
and but I'm just I feel blessed that she's been here for me, and I hope that I show up for her too.
Yeah, I think that's so important to point out because I'm a big statistics guy. It always fascinates me, and if it's not that your wife struggled, I'm understanding she didn't struggle with any addiction. It was just you, and so she's doing this work because of your bond and relationship, which is absolutely amazing. But
That's incredible.
They say couples that where if they're both actively in addiction, one person gets sober, the other doesn't. It's a 0% chance, and oftentimes if it's one person is an addict, gets sober, like you said, that self-discovery, I know I've gone through it, I can relate to it. I'm a person that, having gotten sober, there was a relationship that now and sober clearly would not have worked. And it's scary, that unknown that oftentimes us addicts don't like, and we do the numbing out because of it. But it's so important to put out there.
It is, and same with friendships, right? I lost friendships in early recovery, and that's okay. That was part of my evolution too, of and getting to see with clarity who are the people that are really going to show up for me and support me and rally for me. And that was, actually really empowering to see that. And at the time, in the first year, I was like, oh well, it was really 15-year friendships that just went away because those people couldn't respect the fact that I was in sobriety, or kept pushing alcohol on me, and I just had to walk away from those. But boy, what's come of it since, and the friendships and just lifelong camaraderie that I found in rooms and out of rooms makes up for it in spades.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that, and it's nice because my phone doesn't ring as much, or the text messages don't come in as much. But when they do, like you said, it's people that I show up for and show up for me, and that's a blessing to have that change in life. It's like, boy, I don't have to manage all these dysfunctional, fucked up relationships, friendships anymore. It's like things are good.
Yeah. No, it's true. Honestly, yesterday I feel like every text message I got was like from one of my sober friends, and and we have a friend who's going through some stuff right now, and who's in the rooms, and so a bunch of people just rallying around that person. It's really beautiful to see.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, and for me, I mean, right, that's giving it away is what helps keep me sober. And so this book to me is an act of that, is trying to give it away to somebody else. And I was always struck, hearing that in a room, the first 6 months of sobriety, this guy with 35 or so years of sobriety said that to me. It was just, thank you for being here. And, you have like however many days I had, but you being here helps keep me sober. And I'm just grateful for you. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? But now I see that, and I get that I can text somebody who has 21 days in the first thing in the morning and check in with them to see if that's now 22. And then that puts me in a mindset of service that, leads through the rest of the day. And it's a really beautiful thing of just finding a way to live your life now, in gratitude and service.
Absolutely. Well, before we get to some fun random questions, kind of selfishly, I would like to know, when you got into recovery, what were some of the good routines and not only mental health maintenance, physical health maintenance, things that you did that became very effective and continue to evolve for you even to this day? Like you said, practicing medical professional in a pandemic, father of 3, married, there's the good days, there's the shit days.
Yeah.
How do you maintain it now?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is I've had to be adaptable and flexible over time, and my needs change, and the ability to meet those needs has changed. And so early in recovery, obviously, it was big on daily meetings. It was being in therapy. At the time, I was on medications. I've actually been off medications now for about 5 years, and because I'm in a space where I just don't need them. I will go back on them tomorrow if I do. But it's, physical exercise, therapy, meetings, having some sort of semblance of structure and routine is big for me. I was big into yoga early in recovery, like hot yoga and going to
I love hot yoga.
right?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, me too. And so for that first year, now this was before I had kids, I could do that.
Mhm.
And then, we had kids, and so I couldn't go to the hot yoga studio for 2 hours on a weeknight. And so, we bought gym equipment for our house and did other things where I can work out here. And a lot of time in mindfulness and reflection and journaling. And so those are, some of the things that continue to work for me. Um, I'll be honest, before this pandemic hit, I was down to like, a few meetings a month. And that was, what I felt was fine. And it was good routine because I had right. I mean, I was texting with friends every day, but I just wasn't going to a ton of meetings. And with this virtual pivot in the meetings, and then just this pandemic and the stress of it and what's happened in our medical workforce and everything, like I'm at like 5 or 6 meetings a week now again.
Mhm.
And it's just, it's been the greatest blessing, like, of this last year. Like, things were tough last summer when all this hit and we had so much uncertainty. I was, you know, helping craft policies for what do we do if we run out of medical equipment and we have to ration care for patients and all these heavy, heavy things, right? And we didn't know what was going to happen. And I just, I was like, I just got to get back into the rooms,
Yeah.
and it's just so cool that now with the virtual pivot of this, I go to meetings in Chicago. I can go to meetings in, Louisville. I can go to meetings and it's just, I've met people from all over the country in these rooms I would have never met before that now are friends that I'm texting with on a daily basis. It's just super cool that that whole world has been opened.
Yeah. Now, my primary one is the majority of the guys are in San Diego, and some that left San Diego to Texas. And it was actually a former guest of ours that got me involved with that group and is taking on sponsorship because I got away from working the steps. I did that ego-driven thing of I got this, and boy, the anxiety was getting worse and worse. And it was like, no, I don't fucking got this. And so I'm with you because these guys are, it's been great, so absolutely. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, and that's right. And for me, it was, at the time last summer, 6.5 years into continuous sobriety, it was so much more about what we're talking about, just my anxiety and trying to manage or micromanagement, trying to control it again, right? Trying to just take back the reins of everything. And so just being back in the volume of every day has just put me in such a better space of I'm gonna control what I can control. And so it's been such a blessing.
Yes, sir. Well, the book for those listening is Long Walk Out of the Woods. It really goes in depth with Adam's story. Just it's wonderful read. We highly recommend it. So click the link in the podcast description. It'll take you to the Amazon page that you can get it. Dr. Hill, are you ready for some random questions? Sorry. What did I leave out?
I gotta ask you a question.
Go ahead.
It's not a random question.
Go ahead.
How do you feel about the COVID-19 vaccine?
So I got mine a few months ago, so
Okay.
definitely endorse. And I had the Pfizer vaccine and had relatively no effects from it, and so strongly endorse and support that anybody should get it, and so that we can hopefully get things back to some semblance of normal.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
I hope so.
I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I want to educate myself more on it. So I have a couple family members who got it, but they told me it's either 85% or 90% effective, but you still have to wear a mask. You still can't be around. So another part of me is saying, well, you're essentially doing the same thing with or without the vaccine. The rules still are the same. So that's why I was just kind of a little hesitant on it. Like I said, I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I really just don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of still practicing the social distancing and mask is, until we reach this level of kind of herd immunization, until, it's to
Right.
protect other people. And so, is still a temporizing measure until we reach that level of
Sure.
critical immunization mass. And which I hope now with the new Johnson and Johnson and the new rollout strategies that we'll get there in the next few months. I mean, that's my hope. I saw a stat right now, like I think 1 in 4 adults in the US that were eligible have been vaccinated as of a few weeks ago, and so huge progress that's being made.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. It would be nice to be able to, maybe by 4th of July, enjoy some festivities with some public gathering,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I hope for too. I miss going to concerts. I miss going
Oh, yes.
to basketball games, and heck, I mean, for my kids, taking them to the museum and things that I'm ready to start doing again. Even as an introvert, I want to.
Yeah, no, same here.
Yeah,
And
I'm with you.
back with the kids thing too, it's got to be harder for them because we're adults. We can, for the most part, do the best we can in order to keep some kind of normalization during a pandemic. But kids, they don't really understand or get what's going on. Why can't I go to my friend's house? Why can't we go to the arcade? Why can't we go here or there? So, and with my nephew specifically, I see it wearing on them to where they're just they were so extroverted and now they're so introverted to where they don't want to do anything. They don't want to go anywhere. And it's just, for the kids, it's definitely got to be even more rough. So hopefully we do get back to normal pretty soon, whatever that new normal will be.
Right.
And back to basketball, the Warriors suck now, so tickets would be cheap. So they were good before this thing happened, but we'll see what happens.
So what I'm hearing is COVID-19 made the Warriors suck.
That's exactly what happened. That's the headline for this episode. That in KD leaving.
That's going to be the title. COVID-19 made the Warriors suck with Dr. Adam Hill.
Doctor, you get me. Are you taking new patients? I like you. All right.
No, I was getting so concerts. Well, I worked for rock radio for 20 years. What are some of the bands you would go see? You by yourself, or you and the missus and friends?
Yeah, so one of my favorite bands, actually a band called Need to Breathe. Like I love them. We've seen them a ton. I'm actually a classic rock guy though too. Some of my favorite people to see, I mean, obviously, rest in peace, Tom Petty, but
Sure.
Petty and Springsteen, and those are some of my favorite shows to go to bands like that, and usually with my dad, even still, to rock out with him. And honestly, just any, one of my buddies is in a band. They don't perform anymore, but we just used to love to go to their shows at local venues, right? Just to support local artists, just get out there and see some of those people and honor their work. And so I just love live music in general, and but definitely more of a rock guy.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. Growing up, my mom was the Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, Pink Floyd, and my dad was like the Kiss, AC/DC, Metallica. So I got the best of both worlds, and that's still my jam, just classic
Let me
rock.
let me hit you with a story real fast. So
Sure. Yes.
I believe I was in late high school, it might have been early college, and so Metallica was touring around and with Korn and gosh, who else were they?
It was like the
System of a
summer
Down.
sanitarium tour.
Yes, the Summer Sanitarium tour, right? And James Hetfield got in an accident of Technics in the night before a show and like burned his hand and got hospitalized. So we go down to Kentucky Speedway to see this show, System of Down, Korn, there's one other band there, and they make an announcement, James Hetfield's not going to be here tonight, but the show is going to go on. And so, Jonathan Davis sang like Metallica songs. He sang,
That's dope.
yeah, he sang One, and like, so in System of Down lead singer, I forget his name, sang like Sanitarium and like,
Tankian, yeah.
yeah, it was like the best concert ever. We got to
That's-
see, all of Metallica, but with lead singers from all these other bands. And
That's so
just,
cool. I mean, that's
was-
not cool he burned his hand, but I get what you're saying.
fine. He was fine. But they were so then not only did they put on this show, but then all the ticket holders got to go see a free Metallica show the next year too. How classy
Oh,
is that?
nice.
So then we
Yeah.
got to go see him again like the following year. It's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Metallica's always treated their fan base so great. I've probably seen them, I think at least a half a dozen times live. Saw them on the last tour, and I was there because we're so close to San Francisco the night before the Super Bowl, where everybody was rallying to have them play the Super Bowl, and of course NFL and TV. No, thank you. So they're like, we'll put on a concert. It was so awesome. Love that band.
Pearl
All
Jam.
right. Oh yeah. All right. Random questions before we give Dr. Hill the final word.
If you could have dinner with just one person, living or not, who would it be and why? This could be anybody, from Elvis to anyone.
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly, somebody that I just love and respect and would love to pick their brain is Barack Obama. I just think that, that would be a dinner table conversation I would love to have.
For sure.
Yeah. I will not do my Barack Obama impersonation. He's tired of it.
We've heard it a million times. Go back to the last episodes, Dr. Hill. You could hear it.
Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Murder mystery TV shows. That is, anything like 2020 Dateline, Homicide Hunter, like that. I don't know. That's watching that stuff as I fall asleep is a guilty.
This isn't real, but what about Blacklist? You ever get into Blacklist on Netflix?
I'm aware of it with James Spader, but never actually watched it. My dad was a huge fan.
Oh my gosh, James Spader's fantastic in it. He's amazing. Couldn't have picked a better actor to play his role.
Yeah, I've heard great things. I like the real mystery stuff.
Sure, the real stuff. Yeah, no, I hear you. All right, if they were to make a movie about you, who would you cast to play yourself? Anybody famous in the world, who would you cast to play you in a movie?
So my sister made a joke when I wrote this book that if there's ever made a movie of the book, it would be John Krasinski from did I say it right, from The Office?
Yep.
John Krasinski. Oh, Jim.
Yeah,
Jim Halpert.
Jim Halpert.
Yeah.
So I think I'll stick with that.
Okay.
I could see that because he's it's funny because he did like The Office and then he did the Tom Clancy show on Amazon. I was like, yeah, Jack Ryan, right? And I'm like, I like his work and I'll check it out. I'm like, wow, this dude's got acting chops. Holy hell, So I could see that. That would be good. Favorite hobby of any kind?
I mean, it's definitely running or working out, like just getting out and, getting lost in some fresh air on a trail, or just getting in a good workout is maybe not a hobby, but it's definitely the thing that I do in my spare time when I can. The second being anything outdoors with the kids, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. If you were stuck on a deserted island and you could only take one, or well, you're stuck. Okay. If you were on a deserted island, you can only take one movie and one album. What would those be?
Oh boy. So I mean, one of my favorite movies is probably Shawshank Redemption.
Great movie.
We're Searching for Bobby Fischer. I don't know. I've always loved that movie, which isn't as a popular of one. The album, let's see. I know it's probably not like, I love the Tom Petty Wildflowers album.
Oh, God.
Sure.
Yes.
I know it's probably not his most popular album, but that was one that came out like in the formative years of my teenage years that I just always loved. So maybe I'll choose that one.
Yeah, no,
Perfect.
that's great. Well, Dr. Hill, we like to leave the guest with the last words. Anything of encouragement that you can lend to folks, not only obviously through this time and as a pandemic, hopefully we get back to the quote unquote norm, but also those seeking recovery, in recovery, or maybe a loved one of theirs that has an addict as a loved one.
Yeah, I would just love to be able to remind that everyone has a story, and it may not be evident or obvious on the surface, but that all of our stories matter, and that each one of our stories deserves a loving, compassionate, empathic ear and a space to be heard. And so, I hope with that people will be able to find their own spaces to seek help and treatment when they need it, and just encourage people to reach out their hand and know that there's so much hope and beauty on this path of recovery in the future, and that you can reclaim your life in such a miraculous way. And if you just keep showing up and reach out your hand.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Hill. This has been a real pleasure. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you both. It's been wonderful being with you, and thanks for highlighting all these stories and making a difference in the world. So thank you.